Hello, this is GIS 311 lecture in preparation for our class on May 21st, Tuesday, 2013. Here is the tentative plan. 3 to 4 will be lab help, etc. From 3:30 we should be able to get into the classroom. 4:15 to 4:30 we'll have announcements. 4:30 I will display some of the great Lab 6 bonus maps. 4:45 I'll ask if there are any last minute questions for Lab 7, and then at 5 o'clock we'll have Quiz 7, which hasn't been written yet. I had one quiz ready, but I'm going to have to change that up a little bit. And then the tentative plan is to have you work on your labs from 5:30 to 9 p.m. Just a reminder, the karaoke quiz combines a lecture and quiz under the theory that tell me I forget, show me I may remember, and involve me and I'll learn. I thought I'd start off with a map of the day, or a map of the lecture. This is an interesting map I had no idea existed. It's wet where alcohol is not banned. That's the bluish area. Yellow, there are partially dry portions of those counties. And in fact, I actually lived right there where my mouse is and had no idea that there were some controls, alcohol controls. The red is dry. Those counties are strict, no alcohol, or strict alcohol controls. And then for the state of Alabama, it appears that Georgia, there is no data over here. The next map. This is another interesting map about alcohol consumption. There are green, consumption not prohibited. There are family exceptions in the pink slashed area. Locations exceptions, so perhaps that's in the home or specific areas. In purple there are both kinds of exceptions. An exception for both together, maybe a parent in the home, and yellow is neither type of exception. I display this map because it carries the theme of the previous map, the dry versus not dry counties, but also to demonstrate that it takes more to make a good map than just a legend that you think will work. We have no idea what these items mean in the legend, and therefore this is a horrible map because we cannot tell what exactly it's trying to tell us. Something to think about as you work on your Lab 7 and all maps from here on out. This map is a simple layout description or visual. I think it's pretty easy to tell that the map on the upper left is bad and the map on the bottom right is not as bad. First of all, the title should not be in the middle of the page. The map should not be up in the top right of the page. The north arrow is about 100 times too big. It should be about the size of this mouse, for example, this mouse area, maybe even the yellow area that you're seeing. The legend doesn't explain what these numbers mean. Scale bar, smack dab in the middle. Ohio EPA doesn't really mean much. However, on the right we have a nice title and subtitle. We have the map at Visual Center. I'll talk about that more as we move on. The legend is very clear. These are earwig bites per 1,000 persons. This is in black and white at this point, so it is hard to tell between these symbols, but we can assume that in the real map that it was color and it was more easily understood. Scale bar over to the left, and notice there is no north arrow because there is really no need for a north arrow in this map. We know that north is up, and therefore it's not needed. Another example of what a map should not look like is this. This is a Jackson Pollock painting, and this tries to drive home the fact that just because you can add everything does not mean you should. Because technically, if you added everything in the world to the map, it would be a solid black map. Map layout components, or map layout pieces. You definitely should have a title and most likely a subtitle. Who, what, where, why, when. Who, what, where, why, and when. Very necessary in the title and the subtitle, and or some explanatory text, which I'll get to in a minute. The legend. Use symbols, and you do not need to label your legend with the word legend. We know that it's a legend, and therefore no need to put in the word legend. Scale bar. Make sure you use the correct scale bar for the correct map, not necessarily the inset or locator map, but the main map. And I'll give you a little demo on that. Explanatory text, that's a short paragraph that should at the very least, contain your name, contact information, data sources, the projection, and most likely other information that may be required to explain the map. Or you may have two explanatory text boxes. A directional north arrow if you feel it is needed and appropriate, or if your boss tells you that you need a directional and north arrow. Sources and credits in a text box, that could be the explanatory text, or you may have two of them. A border or neat line, sometimes those are necessary, and sometimes they make the map look better. I'll give you a demo on those, and you'll use one in your Lab 7 map. And a locator map. A locator map uses a smaller reference map to tell you where on the landscape the main map exists. At the very bottom, step number 9 are don'ts. There's going to be a lot of things that I tell you that you should not do. And while we're working through this, item 10, you should understand that there's an entire theory of mapping. We covered it in chapters 2 and 3, primarily, of our required textbook, but there are courses, graduate courses, books and books and books written on the theory of mapping and how to map. We are just touching on it in one small lab. And I must reiterate that. Understand that there are courses designed around cartography, and we're just touching on the basics in one lab of this course, GIS 311. I'm going to go through some do's and don'ts from the required reading. These should ring a bell, or at least you should recognize them. Map layout focus. Where do we start reading a page? And this is from page 132. What are the important areas and the least important areas? The map on the left is incorrect. The map on the right is better. The legend is huge, and we can't tell between what these dots are, but the point of it is we start reading in the upper left and move down to the bottom right. At least those of us in North America, that's the way we do things. We have a nice title, subtitle, and then we proceed. The least important information would be the projection, the whatever that is trying to explain to us. RF equals 1 to 15,000. Maybe that's the reference focus. And the legend should actually be a little smaller, but at least it's not in the direct line. The most important information is the title and the map. Visual center. On the left, the visual center has a smattering of information, the legend, some white space, and the map. Whereas on the right, we have the visual center being these hash marks. That's where the main portion of the map should be. That is how you should line up your maps. And again, this is a general overview. For right now, we're having a basic conversation about mapping. use the visual center to your advantage. Overall balance. On the left, there doesn't appear to be any balance. Notice the spacing on this side versus the spacing on this side, and this blank white space. Here the map is much more balanced. Granted, these aren't the best maps in the world, but this is the least bad of the two. Again, some more about balance. There's a symmetrical versus asymmetrical discussion. I believe that's on page 135. And you should take concern to express what you're trying to get at with your map. Which conveys what? If it's a traditional map, perhaps it should be more traditional, which means symmetrical, being the one on the left, where everything is symmetrically oriented. Conservative would be more symmetrical. Simplicity, symmetrical. Rule following, symmetrical. Modern, progressive, complexity, and creativity would verge on the one on the right, which is asymmetrical. The title isn't centered, the legend isn't centered, etc. Again, a basic discussion about map balance. Sightlines. The image on the left has a plethora of sightlines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on the bottom, cutting through the page, and 4 cutting through horizontally. Whereas the visual on the right has 4 on the bottom and 4 on the right. Notice that it's not symmetrical. The title is still over here on the left, but the sightlines, it's a lot less busy. This is too busy. This isn't a good design. This is a much better design. Some more to think about as you're designing your maps. The map layout grid, again talking about a symmetrical versus asymmetrical. Here we only add an additional sightline or two, but it is asymmetrical versus the one on the left, which is very symmetrical. Technically, there would be another sightline here and here and here, but you get the idea. There are intellectual and visual hierarchies. You should have read about the figure-ground relationship, meaning the visual depth in your map, and we do that by colors or emphasis of certain features. There are design guides out there to help you with this. We're only keeping a basic intro at this point. You can enhance visual hierarchies and add depth to flat maps to help the reader see a point, such as white and black and or colors. Make a visual difference between certain items using color or shading. Use detail where detail is needed and less detail in the non-important items. You may use crisp edges to highlight important areas. Layering, what goes on top of another in the map. Texture, we'll be adding a hill shade to our map in Lab 7. And then shape and size. The most important things will have the shapes that draw your eye and also the right sizes. Moving on, some other noteworthy notes. Remember the visual center. Don't cluster everything in one corner. Use balance. Organize your elements on the page. Use hierarchy. Make background out of the least important items of your map. Highlight the important areas. Use light and dark areas for emphasis. And you may also use transparency. We'll use some transparency in Lab 7. Use your readings. And what are the readings, you ask? Chapter 1, the big picture on design. Chapter 6, map layout from making maps. Chapter 9, map symbolization from making maps with Krieger and Wood. And Chapter 10, type on maps from making maps. At the very least, have them in your folder or have them on your USB drive so that you can refer to them as you're doing Lab 7 and also your bonus maps and Lab 8. Move those back out of the way. If you're wondering where the readings are, this is from our Catalyst webpage, TGIS 311, Week 8 required readings. They are also available in the Canvas section